All right, thank you everyone for joining today. We're going to talk about star scoring. My name is Dwight Pattison. I've been working as a consultant for the last 12 years, been in the industry for many years. I just love talking about stars, quality, performance, you name it. So we've set up these sessions and I'm so happy you've joined us. And this is for part 4 of our series. And I've got a colleague to join me this time, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Hey, thanks, Dwight. Hi, I'm Cynthia Polly Martin. I'm a nurse and I've been working with star ratings since the demonstration project started. However, for the past 10 years, I have been assisting health plans across the country in analyzing and improving their star rating. So I'm very happy to be joining Dwight today in this discussion on the star rating scoring.
Great. I'm going to start the slide presentation here. Hold on. Okay, everyone. So like I said, this is part 4 of a 5-part learning series, all dedicated to stars. Today, we're going to talk about the stars methodology. It's a bit more of a classic 101 training session, but I hope you've gone and had a chance to see some of the other sessions. If you haven't, they're available and recorded on YouTube at QP Advantage. I encourage you to go and check those out. Well, also, you can sign up for next week's session, which I think is always an interesting topic. We're going to talk about cut points and goal setting and the challenges of reaching those 4 stars. I think that'll be a really fun topic to go through. But thanks for joining today. Like I said, we're going to talk about star ratings, get into some of the methodology. Hopefully that will help you. For those that are new to stars, get a little bit of footing ground in that, and then others who are sort of in stars have a chance to sort of rethink things, take a step back and think about your strategies and your performance. Like I said, our objective is to have you have a clear understanding of how stars is scored today so you can improve and understand your plan's performance better. All these sessions are 30 minutes. They're fast paced. It is a training oriented module. So we don't do questions answered during the sessions, but we can hold over. So if you want to stay on, ask a question after the whole training, we're happy to do some discussion items, but this is a 30-minute dedicated time. If you need to go on and move about your day, do so. That's fine as well. But let's just jump right in and I'll turn it over to Cynthia to talk about Stars 101.
Thanks, Dwight. You can go to the next slide. Star ratings did come into existence back in 2009, 2010. I mentioned that of the demonstration project, as a way to allow beneficiaries to easily compare plans on Medicare.gov when they were picking their plans. In addition to giving beneficiaries the access to this quality data about plans, it's also a way plans can be awarded for having good quality in the form of their quality bonus payment, which in turn allows plans to offer more robust benefits like dental, transportation, meals, etc. Star ratings are also used by CMS to identify plans where additional compliance oversight might be necessary or might help CMS make decisions on allowing plan expansions. Next slide. All right, so most of you probably understand this timeline, but it's important to make sure that your plan and your plan leaders understand the timeline also. So a member's clinical outcomes, going to the doctor, getting their hemoglobin A1C, filling their medication, and their experience in doing those things today in year 2025, measurement year 2025, will be the basis of the scores released at the end of 2026. Now they're called Star Year 2027 because that's what the beneficiaries use to rate the plans they're choosing for the year of 2027. But however, the bonus and the impact for plans won't be realized until the year 2028. And then on the bottom row, you can see for the next year, measurement year 2026, next year, the financial impact of star ratings won't occur until the year 2029. And most plans end up running 3 star rating timelines at the same time. We've got, and you're probably doing that right now, you're still looking at your measurement year 2024 that just came out with the first plan preview. You've got your current rates of 2025, and a few of those things already are already starting for the 2026 measurement year. Next slide. So the star ratings methodology is challenging in itself, but it's made even more so as CMS makes changes to these star ratings, the measures, the weights, the methodologies, almost every year. On this slide, we show you a little recap of the major changes that are coming for this year and the next 2 years. Things that are going to impact the star year 2026, which is coming out in the fall. And those ratings will be finalized so the beneficiaries can use there to make their 2026 choices. And then we also have on here other known and proposed changes for the 2 years after. So CMS has clear regulations on how star measures can phase into or be retired off of the star ratings, as well as other proposed changes in measure weights and other pieces of methodology that can change. For example, some of the bigger methodological changes we have listed here, and we'll discuss most of them later in this webinar, are the patient experience and access measure weights are now being, for star years 2026, reduced from 4 weight to 2 weight. The EHO for all, which is the excellent health outcomes for all, will be replacing the current reward factor. And then also the hold harmless for the QI measures will now potentially, this is still proposed, apply only to 5-star plans instead of previously. Now it applies to 4 stars and above. So CMS is making it harder for plans to achieve that coveted 4 or 5-star rating, and they keep moving the goalpost. All right, next slide. So one may ask, how do we track all the upcoming changes to the star rating? I wish I could give you an easy answer, but to understand and follow the proposed and codified changes, you must be following several regulatory tracks. There's the star rating technical specs that outline most of the measures and formulas for the star rating. Unfortunately, the tech specs are not released until the rating themselves come out. For example, we just received the draft 2020 star year 2026 text earlier this month. The finals will come out later into September, October, but that doesn't help you understand the changes ahead of time. For that, you would have to track either the health plan management system memos, those HPMS memos, the proposed rules, the final rules that usually come out once or twice a year, the annual capitation rates and payment policy known as the announcement, as well as other pieces of star ratings who have their own websites and technical specs, such as HEDIS, CAPS, HOS. It does require someone focusing and tracking these changes on an ongoing basis, or working with people like myself or Dwight, who live and breathe these star ratings every day.
Great. Thanks, Cynthia. I'm going to talk about overall scoring, sort of give a quick high-level review of how those scores come out. Most plans, this is pretty high level. Overall rating plans, MA plans get an overall rating, a Part C rating, and a Part D rating. Those ratings are half-level stars. That's different than the measure level ratings. So all of this comes from the standpoint of we know that stars evaluates quality. There's a set of measures that CMS selects every year: breast cancer screening, colorectal cancer screening, controlling high blood pressure, readmission rates, satisfaction scores related like rating of health plan, medication adherence, a whole litany of measures. And each of those measures receives a star rating based on how you perform against all of the other competitors. And that's based on every year. There are other factors we'll talk about today about how improvement measures look at those same measures and whether you statistically improve, and then other points that are added to the total score, reward factor, and CAI. And we'll get into those details in just a minute. So first and foremost, like I said, there's a set of measures that are scored. You start with reported measures. Now, sometimes the plan is reporting those numbers, like HEDIS is self-reported by the health plan. It's certainly audited and certified, but other measures CMS reports, and then you have to validate that CMS scored you correctly, like appeals measures and the like. And so let's say, for the example, you get a 75%, 380 members are compliant out of a sample of 411 HEDIS measure, and you get a 74.892. And that's rounded up to whole numbers. Most of these measures are whole numbers in star ratings. And when we talk about reaching a cut point or a threshold, sometimes it's just a rounding difference. And I've had health plans with medical record projects like need one more hit to get the rounding number. So like understanding that those rounding numbers could be a difference between a whole number difference and a whole star level are the things of precision you really want to understand. So this 75% is compared to how everyone else is doing. And I'll talk a little bit about this again, and we're going to do a cut point session next week, which will get into this a little bit better. But what they do is do a statistical analysis and compare all the health plans' performance for that year. And depending how you compare, you'll get a 5-star to 1-star based on that performance. And then what's most important after that is that these measures are weighted by importance. And so outcome measures are 3-weighted. Now the patient's experience measures are 2-weighted. The improvement measures are 5 times weighted. And that'll depend on how many points you get. So if you have a 3-star in a measure times the 3-weighted, that's 9 points. And when we talk about the math path and how many points you get, that is what we're talking about, is when you're trying to work towards a certain goal, you can kind of extrapolate based on your measures how many points you need to reach to get to a star level, which then translates to measures you want to improve on and help you prioritize which measures are most important to you. Here's an example, simplified. The plan has 10 measures. I'll note here, not every health plan has the same set of measures. So if you're not a special needs plan, there might be some measures that are not applicable to you, that there's no penalty for that. It's just not included in your score. There are times where you don't have enough data. This typically happens to very small plans or new plans. And so some measures are cut out because they're not yet reliable to measure and hold you competitive to others. And so they'll do an NA. That is very different than if you have a biased data that has failed. That will get a 1-star rating in the measure, but these are measures that are not applicable and are left out of the loop. Like I said, you get a star rating for every measure. It's multiplied by the weight of that measure, whether it's a 1 or a 3, a significant difference in the impact. And then we create a weighted average. And the weighted average is basically like your star level, but with 6 decimal places. So now the example here, the plan has 3.285714. Why is that important to detail at this point? Is that CMS, most of their analysis is done at the 6th decimal place. And I have had plans every year miss the full star rating by 0.0032 or some ridiculously small number. And leaders often will say, there's no way CMS could hold us accountable for a performance that's not even one full measure impact, right? But they will. That's how they do it. Read the technical specs. It's really critical. In this example, the contract gets a 3.5. I'll talk about how that scoring works in just a second. In another example, the same plan set of measures, one measure drops from a 4 to a 3. They get a different number of points. Now their weighted average is 3.21, not that big of a difference. And their star rating is a 3-star. And that's conceptually how it's going to work. You get all these measures, you get them star rated based on how you compare to everyone else. Based on the weight, you get points, and it's a weighted average score. That's what you're starting with, and that's what's really critical to understand. Here's how the rounding numbers work. This is their final rating of 0. I've never seen a plan get a 0, by the way, but here, rarely do we even see 1s. But here's the example. I've marked it out, 3.75. If a contract gets 3.750000, they're a 4-star plan. These are not normal roundings, right? The rounding is at 3.25 for a 3.5, 3.75 for a 4. Get the idea. If you compare that to a plan that got 3.749999, 6 decimal places off by 1 point would mean that plan is a 3.5. So when we talk about precision and analysis and evaluation, sometimes these big projects where we're guessing cut points and we're looking at scores comes down to very small numbers and very small differences. And you really need to understand how the variances change based on all the other points you're getting and what that means to your predictions, your forecasts, where you need to be, and why that happens during the star rating. Plus, leadership needs to understand that the level of precision requires better forecasting and mathematics for that process. Okay, let me just quickly go over individual measures. I said before, I'll talk about cut points next week. It'll be a better description of this, but I just want to make a couple points. I already said that precision counts with the whole numbers. So rounding is a problem for plans. If you could just get a few more hits in a measure and you can round up one more star rating, I recommend you think about that in your fourth quarter push this year. Like if you're at 7.44 and you could be 7.45 with 50 more members compliant, try to get that next star level. You don't really know where cut points will land. And it might, even if you think you haven't reached that next star level, those little differences could really be the difference in your final scores and stars. The measures don't have half stars. So when you're evaluating yourself, it's one or the, you're either a 4 or you're a 5. You're not a 4.5. You're not a 4.23682. It's a 4 at a measured level. And again, it's compared to national scores. We'll talk about that in a second. But you need to expect improvement in their scores, and I'll show that in a demonstrated graph. So how are cut points created? I said again, I'll talk about this next week in the session, but here's the big issue. They call it statistical clustering. We're used to natural percentiles, like I'm in the 10th percentile, top 10% of plans. I'm in the 50th, top 50% of plans. That is not how STARS does it. They're taking statistical assessments of the numbers that have reported plans, and they group them by like results. Or in essence, I try to tell people, it's like, imagine like a natural break in results. If there's a big dip in performance and then there's a big increase, sometimes that the statistics say, oh, this looks like a different kind of performance level and a break in the data. And so that's how the cut points come in. The reason that's important to understand, even if you know nothing about statistics or math, is this adds more variability because you add just a few more plans in the reported cycle, and the scores can jump, particularly between the 2 and the 4-star, the middle range. Those numbers jump a lot because of this clustering logic. When you may see traditional numbers and the national average always be the same and not improve, but clustering could jump around because of that difference. It's hopefully helpful for you to understand that. Finally, I wanted you to understand cut points and predicting yourself. This is a totally bogus measure idea, but the idea is like every year you're going to have these 2, 3, 4, and 5-star cut points. Imagine this middle line where a plan is 85%. The next year they get 86. Last year's 4-star was 86, and they're like, hey, everybody, we reached the 4-star. When you're goal setting, you need to understand and expect that others are improving. Even if sometimes cut points drop, presume the improvement is happening because everybody's working towards the same thing. Let's do better. We need higher scores. We need better star ratings. So presume everybody else is working hard to get there. You need to anticipate improvement nationally, even though nobody can tell exactly what's going to happen in the future. The better business model is to help understand what's happening globally and say, hey, I expect scores to go up. Like if you look at CAP scores, globally, we expected some real challenges with satisfaction with health plans, but CAP scores did pretty well this year. So, you got to expect the unexpected, but put it on the positive side. Okay, so that's how cut points work. You're going to be evaluated based on where you fall against how everyone did. It's that current year, so predictions based on prior year are only so good. One thing to note about the CAP survey questions, and we won't have time to go into deep conversation for this, but understand that CAPS is not based on reaching a specific threshold or cut point. It's based on how far or close you are to the national average of performance. And the way they do that is they do give you what they call base groups by percentiles, which look like cut points. And in the cut point tables, when they present your rate performance and you download all the plan performance from after plan preview 2, you'll see cut points. But you don't necessarily reach a 5-star by getting the 5-star cut point. They also do an evaluation of the standard error, another statistical term. They'll look at your statistical reliability of your data, and then they do a statistical t-test between the national average and your score. And if you are not statistically above the average, but your value is, this is all statistics, you may not get your score. So an example on the right is that this plan gets an 89. They're in the 85th percentile. Great, they've reached a 5-star, but because of the small volume of responses, they don't get a statistical test difference, and they end up with a 4-star. The score is actually dropped because of statistical testing. So I talked about case mix adjustment a couple weeks ago in one of our seminars. this is just a whole other element. You really need your analytics team, your evaluation teams to understand the differences of all of this, because let me give you an example in just a minute. Here's an example highlighted where you've got two plans, Plan C and Plan D, with two different ratings, a 72 and one gets a 75. One is below the average, one's above, but because they're not statistically different, they end up with the same star level. Here's even worse scenarios, right? Here is a grid of the rating of a health plan for stars 25, and plans scored from 77 to 94 last year. And this is a year-old data because I don't have public data for the current year. And if you can see, there is 89 and above was the base score for 5 stars. So theoretically, the cut point is 89 for 5 stars. So if you are 89 or above, great, you're 5-star. Look at this. 3 health plans got a 90, but they were scored, and I missed, this is a typo, they were scored 4 stars in that measure. So 56 plans received an observed rate that was within the 5-star range, but because of statistical testing, they got a 4-star. That's a huge number of plans that aren't reaching the potential that's real when their members score them. So it's not even just reaching performance, it's understanding that response rates, your sample size, the spread of responses. So if a lot of people, if everyone said you're a 8 or a 9, you're going to get a 5-star. But if a lot of plans said 5, rated you a 9 or a 10, and a lot of members rated you 2 and 3, the spread of scores can change the statistical test. So you got to know the makeup of your responses to understand why you're getting a 4 when you should be getting a 5. So the minute I see a plan that's has the cut point, but not the test, there's some real work that can be done quickly to shore that up and to make sure you get the results. It works in the reverse on the downside. You could be a 2-star and get a 1-star, or you could be a 1-star and move up to a 2-star. All of those variations happen. Okay. Now, I think this is for Cynthia. So we're going to turn over QI measures for Cynthia.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dwight. All right, so let's talk about those very important QI measures. We can start with the next slide. There we go. So some plans could almost think of these QI measures as a bonus, but in reality, they are 2 distinct measures that are 5 weighted measures. So there's one for Part C, one for Part D, and they can have a huge impact on your overall score. So what happens is CMS takes almost every measure and compares your rates to your prior year score. And just as Dwight talked about a statistical t-test, they do a statistical t-test on the comparative scores. And if it's statistically different positively, you'll get a score of +1 for that measure. If there's no change statistically, you'll get a 0. And if there's a statistical decline, you'll get a -1. Each statistical improvement or decrease is different for each measure. There's not a standard 3 points, like from a 75 to a 78 is considered statistical improvement. Depends on the size of the membership and the types of the measures. So for one measure, like a CAPS measure, 2 points higher may be significant, but in another measure, like a colorectal cancer screening, you might need to have 4 or 5 points difference to see that statistical improvement. So every measure gets the +0, +1, or 0, or -1, and they are weighted averages. So some measures count more than others. For instance, readmissions at 3 weighted will count more than another measure. If that's a +1, you're getting the full 3 points as opposed to just the additional one. And for most plans, or many plans, they cannot handle, a lot of statistical drops, lowering. The minute you have 2 or 3 measures dropping, you're going to see much lower star QI measure results. All right, next slide. So this is why we say for some plans, it's almost like a bonus. So CMS calculates your overall points both with and without the QI measures. If they calculate your score without the QI measure, and your score is at a 4, which is 3.76 or above, they'll use what they call the hold harmless rule, where you'll receive your rating with or without the QI measure, whichever is better for you and to your benefit. So if your QI measure rate will hurt you, you will not receive your score wrapped in with their QI measure. If it'll help you, it will be included. So it's almost like a bonus factor for those plans that are doing well. And so if you're already high level performing, a plan like a 4 to a 5, it's very hard to improve statistically at that level. So CMS is not going to punish you for that. And that's why they call it the hold harmless. Unfortunately, CMS is proposing to change this hold harmless rule to apply to only 5-star rated plans going forward. It's proposed potentially, it's not codified yet, but we'll be watching it for maybe the STAR 2027 and watching out because they're going to move it from being 4 and 5-star plans being held to have this hold harmless rule to just 5-star plans. So if you're below a 4, your overall rate is calculated with the QI measure. So if you're a 3.5 on the edge of a 4, potentially when the QI is added, if it's a 3-star, it's going to lower your score even more. You know, many plans don't focus enough attention on these QI measures. You may not be able to move a star measure from a 2-star to a 4-star or 2-star to a 3-star, like Dwight was talking about before, but you might be able to improve it enough to make it a statistical improvement, which will positively impact these 5-weighted QI measures. All right, let's talk about reward. Excuse me. All right, so the reward factor. You know, we'll just talk quickly about it because this is the final year of the reward factor, and it's going to be replaced by the EHO for all 4-star years of 2027. So reward points is a bonus factor. It can't hurt you. It can only help you. This year that the R factor is applied, next year it will be the EHO for all will be replacing the reward factor. So these factors come on top of your scores. So, and the reward factor is historically applied to high performing plans. So it's evaluating if plans have a stable, strong performance across all measures, and CMS could give you up to a 4.4 value. It's incremental. So looking at the methodology outlined each year in the STAR tech specs, the reward factor tended to be only for 4 stars and above. For STAR year 2025, to qualify for a reward factor, your overall plan rating would need to be higher than 3.64. So you know that cutoffs change every year, but we would have to wait to see during second plan preview for STAR year 2026. And then our EHO for all, it's focused on a very different goal. Some plans perform very well for members with social risk factors. We know it doesn't call it social risk factors, they call them risk factors, but basically that's what it is. It's how you're helping and performing with your low income and disabled members and how each of the STAR measures performs for that. So plans that have low population in their low income and or disabled members may not qualify for your EHO for all at all. So next slide. All right, we did do a presentation on EHO for all just last week, which you can watch on the recording on the YouTube channel if you would like. But the takeaway of the change of the reward factor to EHO for all is that the reward factor really benefited high-performing plans that did not give them potential for incremental improvement. So you could get a 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, or 0.4. So those are huge point increases. The HO for all is a linear reward. It will start at a 0.0001 and go all the way up to 0.4. So the allocation is the same, but it's more likely that plans will get less points for the HO for all than they got from the reward factor. And it could be a different set of plans because it's only focused on plans with a certain percentage of low income or disabled members. plans with low membership and those with low membership with those with social risk factors may not even qualify for the EHO for all. All right, Dwight's going to talk about the CAI.
Sure. Thank you. So CAI is known as the Categorical Adjustment Index. It's these additional points that are added on or subtracted from your score at the end of the star rating. It's often, again, something that's not studied or examined very well for plans, and it is a lot of points for some plans. And I'll go through this quickly. The whole idea of this is to look at accounts of your members and whether you serve low income, dual eligible, and disabled beneficiaries, and how many of those members you have compared to the other health plans. And this adjustment is to create fairness. And some people, I had someone explain it to me like a golf handicap, where we want to have a fun game and we want to compare each other's performance, but we start at different levels. And so if you tend to have a lot of members, they're going to actually bump up your score a little bit. If you have a lot less members than average, you're going to have a score drop down. And I'll give you a couple examples. Critical points here, CAI is calculated for Part C, Part D, and overall separately, and then applied to each of them. These are very valuable or positive or punishing points. The reward factor is only positive. The CAI can actually be negative. So really quick, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is the process. So CMS sends out this report and people get caught up in what it means and which measures are included. I would say don't obsess about this. Here's what they do. They take last year's star rated data, the year before, not the star they're calculating right now, and they compare members in dual eligible, low income status, and disability status compared to the those members are not in the category. And they look at a series of measure results and star differences. And depending on the difference, they adjust that average across the measure. And that's the points they're going to give you. And the more members you see for those in that population, the more points you'll get. The less members you see, the less points you get. There are lookup tables in the tech notes spec. So you can see one thing I'll tell you is it changes every year pretty dramatically. You're going to want to work hard at sort of under predicting your bonus and over predicting your negative, because sometimes that switches each year. And let me give you a table view of it. It looks at the percentage of members that are disabled, and you look across the top there, and it starts with less than 14% and goes up to above 43%. So that means if you have 44% of your members disabled, you're in category 5, right? That's a pretty significant amount. And on the other side, it's those low income member flags. And it starts at category 1 of less than 6% of your population is in these flags, and it goes up to 100%. And people say, how could you have 100%? Imagine a health plan that's 100% dedicated to dual eligible members. They're already in category 10. But it's a scope, right? You're going to have 1s and 2s and categories and the like. So an example I gave you was when they fell down in the middle. So they had 22% disability, so they fall into category 3. They have 28% low income. Actually, I got this number. I circled the wrong number. And they got 28%. They end up with a 0.018790. This is STARS 26 table. You can see that the highest number of value is in CAI is 0.1455. That's a huge, from a STARS rating, that's a huge number of points. It goes down to the negative, not as many negatives, but you can see the wide swath of points. If you have an opportunity and you look at your markets, you're going to want to understand, like, why am I on? If you're on the cusp of one number or another, what do you need to have to do to get that? Maybe you need to make sure your LIS flags are met correctly, but you tend to not be able to like strategize on this. But when you're talking about forecasting, if you're reducing your market, if you're adding a dual SNP, if you're leaving an area, you're dropping a dual SNP, whatever structural changes you're making to your health plan, you need to apply that analysis to the CAI points, because it could have a big effect either way on what you think you need to have with your measure level stars. We can't just focus on the measures. We got to look at everything that affects our performance. Next slide is 25. I'll just jump between the two. These are the 2 different years. The category groupings by disabled and low income percentages change every year. They're pretty dramatic. And then the number of points you get. So the same health plan went from having a 0.02 points to a 0.002, big drop in the number of CAI points or actually it's increased from 25 to 26. So all of a sudden, they're getting a big lift in CAI that could go back down the next year. So you really got to make sure you include this in your analysis and forecasting because, like I said, these numbers matter. They are mathematically checked. You can evaluate CMS's scoring, but you also can start doing modeling, scenario planning when you're making changes to your organization, and you make some strategic judgments on that. So I hope that helps understand the factors of how scores are calculated. You start with this weighted average, and then you add points or subtract them from CAI, and you can add points from a reward points schedule, and that's your overall score that gets rounded to the star level. And so you want to understand these big ticket items because depending on how your plan is coming in at the score level, these might be opportunities to evaluate and better forecast and understand your performance. We don't have as much time today to talk about strategy and perspective because we've already used up our 30 minutes. But as you go, if you have questions, you can certainly contact me, ask me what follow-up you might need to understand. I hope you sign up for next week's session related to cut points. If you're really interested in readmissions or case mix adjusted cap scores, those recorded sessions are already posted. But I appreciate you attending this session. It was to give you a high-level, intensive, fast-minute paced assessment of how STARS is scored to give you a better understanding of where you might look at in your performance. I'm happy